And yeah, so I'm Marvin Malek, and we'll be presenting a brief explanation about why I feel optimistic. Can everybody see this slide here? Let me. All right, anyway, I'm optimistic because of the bigger picture.
But
So here's the United States.
we're seeing the slides at your left also as well, and so the main slide is smaller than it needs to be.
Trouble getting rid of them. Hold on. Let me keep trying.
There should be an option for like slideshow or full screen. Yeah, there you go.
That help?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll briefly talk about the United States over the last, say, 40 or 50 years. And I feel that we are in an unusually stable, prolonged period with a particular political regime, which I'm going to characterize as the Reagan era. And so this is basically began with his presidency right from the start. And I don't know how many of you know this part of the history, since all of you are young enough to not have experienced it. But the very first thing Ronald Reagan did when he came into office was he broke a strike of federal government employees in the air traffic control union. They had already failed in negotiating, and he replaced all of them with scab workers and broke the union. And that was symbolic of a large number of anti-union laws that were passed both federally and around the country that have succeeded in dropping the unionization rate very substantially from what used to be about a third of the US workforce in the 1950s down to as low as 11 or 12% currently. And it's in North Carolina and some other southern states, it's actually 6%. So that was part of the regimen. There were also repeated tax cuts, which largely went to the wealthy, in something called supply side economics, where if you give more and more money via tax cuts to rich people, that they'll grow so many jobs that won't increase the deficit. But that's been promised and tried multiple times. It never succeeds, and so the national debt has risen, especially under the Republican Party. It sometimes arises during the Democratic Party, particularly during Biden, because he's done so much spending. But during the Democratic regimes that's occurred and during this period, um, they haven't done tax cuts, but there have been some increase in the deficit, especially most recently. Anti-government ethos. So in Reagan's first inaugural, he made the statement, government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem. So the idea was no matter what was going on, even extending this to COVID more recently, no matter what goes on, the government's not going to solve the problem, and became dangerous in the era of COVID when we had an insufficient amount of government activity. Reversal of civil rights protections was a key element. And then privatization efforts, charter schools, the military, the VA, Medicare, and block grants for Medicaid. And 1 year later, it was 1982 that the first proposal to privatize Medicare, which ultimately grew into the Medicare Advantage program, took place right then during the early years of the Reagan administration. I just want to say that the political reversal in the country from the amazing victory of like 48 or 49 states by Lyndon Johnson in 1964 prompted a study by a number of Republican-based think tanks. And basically what they decided was that with the passage of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, they could do enough to reassure racists in the country that theirs would be the party that would not push that agenda of anti-racism. And personally, I think that was fundamental to the political change. It was called the Southern Strategy. And so I think that that was actually fundamental to this change in politics. But anyway, so we've been very, very stable, and that's the domestic agenda. We also had continued with the domestic foreign policy agenda, but basically the foreign policy agenda is we don't fight wars here, we fight them elsewhere, which was a continuation of the Cold War policy. There was never a challenge from the Democratic Party. There was a during the Clinton administration, they passed a draconian crime bill that has led to in big part, facilitated the mass incarceration that you heard about earlier in the internship. Repealed welfare, as everyone knew, and in favor of a weak state-run system called TANF. For those of you who heard the talk on a week ago Monday, you've heard about how that's really harmed people who are very poor and can't possibly earn any meaningful income. Repealed the Glass-Steagall banking regulation, which was key in preventing very bad recessions and was very important in why the recession in 2017 and 2007 was so long and terrible. And then Clinton actually made the statement, the era of big government is over. So he gave up even trying. So let's compare this stability in the United States, 36 years of stability. I ended it in 2017 with Trump because politically he's a little different and he's got a few policies that are different, though his domestic agenda is pretty similar with even more tax cuts for the wealthiest people in the country. So in terms of domestic policy, Trump has not represented a change, but I think he actually is different and could talk about that sometime. But anyway, compare all this to Germany. Let's look at German history over a 50-year period. In 1905, expanding economy, vibrant intellectual life, a world leader in chemistry, medicine, and psychiatry, powerful military, became a truly great world power. 10 years later, here they are in the trenches with the gas attacks, fighting a catastrophic war on 3 fronts. They lost millions of soldiers, lost the war, just a catastrophe for the country. 10 years after that, in the middle of the Weimar Republic, with disastrous economic effects. This is in part due to the the war reparations that Germany succumbed to in the peace treaty after First World War. And what this fellow is doing, he has a wheelbarrow. He's going to the grocery store. And the money, they had such amazing hyperinflation of like 1,000% per day, or even unbelievable inflation in their currency. So this guy's taking a wheelbarrow of money to go buy some groceries for his family. It's people have complained about inflation in the United States. We had one year where it was 9% here, and all the other years it's been more like at most 3 or 4. But imagine 1,000% like per day. It's unbelievable what happened catastrophically. So that led to a lot of instability. 10 years later, 1935, optimism under the new leader, and you could see the looks on the people's faces that he was adored. He fulfilled his promise, even making Germany great again. Making Germany great again here, and the people are thrilled when they had already taken over Norway and Denmark, Holland, Belgium, and here they are taking over France just in a 7 or 8 month period. It was amazing what they accomplished by 1940, as well as Poland. So the people are thrilled. These people weren't forced to be there for the most part. This is something to keep in mind. Yeah, it's a dictatorship and you couldn't really oppose it, but you could think about staying home. 5 years after that, 1945, this is a picture of Berlin, completely devastated. The country was just leveled to the ground. It wasn't just Dresden and Hamburg that the Allies bombed, it was the whole country, every bit of industry, almost every urban area, just devastated. 10 years after that, 1955, and Germany has rebuilt and has once again become a great economic power. But there was a lot of tremendous discussion in Germany about guilt, responsibility, and atonement for all that had happened during the big wars, Second World War, and almost everyone agreed that the defeat of the Nazis was a good thing. So this is a degree of rapidity of change that can happen in a society. And for some of you who might know French or Chinese or Italian history, if you did this history in China over the whole period of the 20th century, it would be similar. Wrenching change in China. You know, occupation, initially exploitation by the West, then takeover by Japan, absolutely brutal, you know, killing millions of Chinese people. Then the huge civil war culminating in 1949. I'm just wrenching change. The differences between Mao Zedong and the leaders that followed. So this is not usual necessarily to have 36 years of stability in a country. And now I think with the political era that we're in, there is a difference in the politics of Trump. And I think that this is a consequence of growing income inequality, a very incomplete resolution of racism and other social issues, the ascent of the LGBTQ movement, which has been surprised me at its success. But anyway, I think we're now seeing some wrenching change, some change in this country, and I don't think we're going to go back to just the 36 years. I think we could see change in this country, and given the degree of income inequality and the likelihood that the current regime is going to only make it worse, I think that we could be in for some change. I hope it'll be peaceful, and I think there's a very good chance it could end up progressive. It could go the other way, but I think it'll end up progressive. But I think that the promises of the Reagan era were just in some ways realized, but income inequality was a huge consequence of all that. So I don't think we should assume that this country is just going to have nothing going on in terms of health reform. And I think that all of us may need to become involved in the struggles that lie ahead. And the purpose of this internship is to put you in a position to lead the change in a progressive direction. It may be a good thing, and I think it probably is, if we unite in social movements with other causes that are sympathetic, ranging from anti-racism to how issues around housing and other. I mean, you heard about housing earlier in the internship and how devastating homelessness is to health. So I think these other causes are things you could get involved in.